Tutberidze captures another type of figure skating. Why is Atari sports couples and what can she give them? May is traditionally a month of cardinal changes in the group of Atari Tutberidze. 5 years ago, at this time, Evgenia Medvedeva left her. 3 years ago, Alexandra Trusova. Sasha also returned to Kristalny in May. Atari will remember this transfer window again, but obviously on the positive side. At the beginning of the month, the champions of Russia and Europe Bykova Kozlovsky announced cooperation with her, and a little later the coach Filip Tarasov, who had worked with Nina Moser, and all his students joined the team. The transfer of Sasha and Dima surprises not so much with the fact as with the timing. After a successful post-Olympic season, it seemed that all the crises in Moskvina's group against the backdrop of a clear difference in the results of her two pairs were behind. Bykova and Kozlovsky, commenting on the transition, limited themselves to general phrases. But the repost of the partner's mother that strong athletes cannot train in the same group, because in this case competition is only in training, and there is no intrigue for each other at competitions, is surprising. Perhaps Tarasova and Morozov and the Kozlovsky family are not treated as equal rivals, or the imminent end of Zhenya and Vova's careers is being discussed non-publicly, but the philosophy of Tutberidze has always been built around the daily struggle of students. If conditional Kabibalina and Nyazik had a desire to go to Atari, would she really have refused them in the name of maintaining intrigue and training for Sasha and Dima? If Bykova and Kozlovsky are tired of sparring with Messina and Galyamov, and perhaps constant background resentment towards Moskvina, whose work with rivals turned out to be more successful than with the old-timers of the group, then Tutberidze has a complex of reasons why she decided on an adventurous transfer, where more curious and challenging. In women's skating, Tutberidze reached her peak. Sports couples are a chance to break the stereotype of short careers and narrow specialization in her group. Tutberidze systematically went to dominance in women's skating, and from Team Gold in Sochi in 8 years, she approached the highest possible result, a full podium of students in Beijing, which with great probability would have happened if the doping epic Kamila Valieva had not wrapped up before the personal tournament. It seems that it is no longer possible to come up with something more ambitious within the framework of women's figure skating. Then only 5 jumps, but Atari is too rational to romanticize elements that do not bring results. The task imposed from the outside to bring a student of age 20 plus Atari to significant titles is also hardly of interest, at least until such a qualification is designated by ISU. However, the entrenched positions in pair skating will help level claims about short-term careers. The specifics of the type simply do not imply significant advantages for minors. Tutberidze knows women's skating by heart, from the technique of setting up quads to creating hit programs. Under these conditions, the desire to develop a new discipline for himself is quite understandable. In pair skating, Atari opens up not only medal, but also creative horizons. In the old formulation of Tutberidze Orser challenged me, there was not only resentment for Alexandra Trusova, but also a clear motivation for Atari herself. Constant competition is an important part of not only her training approach, but also her own career as a coach. Tutberidze's work with Daniel Grassel from the same series. It is fraught with considerable risks and problems, from responsibility for the best single skater in Italy to constant pressure from fans, demanding a total ban of all Russian coaches. But this is the very challenge that Atari has long lacked in women's skating. The choice of pair skating instead of dances, familiar from personal experience to both Tutberidze and Blakengos, is also quite understandable. Modern dances are very different from those that Atari herself managed to catch. Her baggage is not very useful here. Daniel's skills as a director in this event are also questionable. The dances suggest a much greater aesthetic value of the programs. Performances in the Tutberidze group are still focused more on utility. They are able to bring excellent points and even produce a wow effect, but it is achieved not by the means that the arbitrators expect in dances. However, it seems that the appearance of Tutberidze in this discipline is a matter of time. And perhaps the right moment will come next year, when the construction of her ice rink is completed. Most likely, Atari will enter the new species in the same way as in sports couples, by attracting specialists from outside. Free ice is a bonus and an increase in the chances that such a person will come not alone, but immediately with students. In figure skating, there has not been a coach of the scale of Tatiana Tarasova for a long time, a person who is able to work equally successfully in all four disciplines. While athletes, in the absence of international starts, are looking for motivation in new competitive formats and increased prize money, Etteri may well find it in the transformation of his own career. Tutberidze set the accents in working with sports couples for herself 2 years ago. I think there is some kind of gap. I see that the greenhouses, unfortunately, for some reason do not jump well. Of course, they spend a lot of time on pair elements, but if they are properly supported, then they will jump better. And I don't always like programs. It seems to me that a little time has gone ahead, but some couples have remained. Tutberidze implemented the same strategy with Tarasova and Morozov. There is a huge aesthetic gap between their Olympic programs in 2018 and 2022, and work on jumping has borne fruit in Beijing. At the same time, the stability characteristic of the Etteri group was not achieved, and last season, due to a lack of motivation or accumulated fatigue, the results completely declined. However, Tarasova and Morozov ended up at Kristalny too late for global changes. Late in every sense, both for changing technique due to age and for stylistic experiments due to the upcoming Olympics. Bykova and Kozlovsky give much more room for maneuver. Firstly, they are not so strictly bound by deadlines. Potentially they are able to perform at least 2 more Olympics until the next Games, 3 years, until Russia is unbanned an indefinite period. Secondly, their artistic range is wider than that of Zhenya and Volodya. Yes, the latter are much more convincing than Bykova and Kozlovsky in the lyrics, but Sasha and Dima are equally interesting both under James Bond and Black Eyes, and Hit the Road Jack. But the main thing is that, unlike Tarasova and Morozov, Bykova and Kozlovsky did not manage to reach the technical ceiling. And, perhaps, the most curious thing in their upcoming work with Etteri is what development vector she will choose for them. Mastering dual ultra-C or strengthening the jumping component. Sasha and Dima learned the quadruple throw and twist back under Moskvina. It is symbolic that the successful public attempt of the first element happened just at the Tutberidze show in Moscow. But paired ultra-C, especially the release, is a much more traumatic and so far unusual sphere for Etteri's headquarters than jumping. Of course, even in Kristalny, Bykova and Kozlovsky will not begin to perform the quad and triple axel. Work on jumps in their case is more about the final stabilization of the solo loop. Last season it turned out quite well as work on complex combinations from 2 triple salchows and a salchow sequence with axels. At the start of their careers, Sasha and Dima also had a triple Lutz in their assets. Now they are trying to strengthen the content of Mishin and Galyumov. This is the motivation for rivals to restore the element. The problem is that Kozlovsky and Bykova are a sports couple who have put together a combo of problems on edge jumps. Dima, as a solo skater, got a mark on the flip, and Sasha, at least at the time of leaving the pairs, had questions with Lutz. The pace of development of the pair department in Kristalny also depends on the success of Bykova and Kozlovsky. If Tarasova and Morozov were in decline before moving to Etteri, then Sasha and Dima left Moskvina at their peak in the status of the best duet in the country at the end of the season. A slight rollback in the results at first can be attributed to adaptation to new coaches. But the closer the first international tournament is, the higher the stakes will be. So far, the prospects for admission of Russians with the same number of quotas are not visible. Taking a prize at the premiere after the unbanned World Championship will be a much easier task than winning the only ticket within the country. However, Tutberidze has another obvious reserve for the formation of new couples, her own students. Even the most resonant off-season pair, Kosternaya Martin, essentially consists of 2 former pupils of Etteri. Perhaps the only thing that Alina is still able to surprise with is her return to Kristalny in a new discipline. Bykova and Kozlovsky are also a pair, made up of single skaters at a conscious age, who managed to compete with Kostorna and Knitsa, respectively. From a practical point of view, this experience is even more useful for Tutberidze than working with Tarasova and Morozov, veterans of the national team, who also came to the group with Maxim Trankov, who knows them very well. compiling duets from your own students, although, most likely, we will rather talk about combinations of single skaters, Atari and partners from the outside, is the next step in the development of the pair department at Kristalny. It is at this stage that the emergence of Ultra C becomes more likely unless, of course, against the backdrop of a global decline in this discipline, the ISO once again thinks about simplifying the jumping part in an attempt to artificially increase competition. However, one of the best qualities of Tutberidze has always been the ability to adapt as much as possible to any rules.